My name is Julianna Crane. I am 29 years old, and exactly 16 years ago, my own mother and father packed my life into garbage bags and kicked me out of their house. I was barely 13. Fast forward to last week, those same parents strolled into the will reading for my late Uncle Walter, the incredible man who actually raised me for the last decade and a half. They walked in with smug, confident smirks and an expensive private lawyer, operating under the absolute delusion that they were about to inherit millions of dollars. But the moment Estate Attorney Margaret Holloway sliced open that sealed envelope and began to read, all that arrogant confidence evaporated. And by the time she finally arrived at Clause 7, my biological mother, the exact same woman who once looked me in the eyes and told me I was no longer her child, leapt out of her chair. The blood completely drained from her face, her jaw unhinged in sheer terror, and her reality shattered. Before we dive into the absolute chaos of what went down in that conference room, if you are someone who loves stories about ultimate karma and establishing ironclad family boundaries, please take a quick second to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. But only if you are genuinely hooked by this premise. Also, I would love to know where you are tuning in from today and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below. Now, to truly grasp why my mother had such a visceral, panic-stricken reaction at that table, I have to rewind the clock to the summer of 2009. Back then, I was just a 13-year-old kid who firmly believed I was the toxic burden ruining my family's life. My childhood in a cramped, modest home in Southeast Portland taught me a harsh truth early on. Affection in our household was a heavily rationed currency. My dad, Leonard Crane, was an auto mechanic down in the city. He was a passive, quiet man, and 90% of the words that came out of his mouth were just echoing whatever my mother commanded. My mom, Patricia, worked as a grocery store cashier, but she ruled our home with the iron fist of a dictator who meticulously calculated exactly who deserved what. Then there was my older sister, Veronica. 2 years my senior, she was the undisputed golden child. She inherited my mother's bright blonde hair, her striking blue eyes, and her effortless, bubbly laugh. Relatives would constantly gush, "Oh, Patricia, Veronica is the spitting image of you at that age," and my mother would practically glow with pride. Me? I was a carbon copy of our late grandmother, my dad's mother. I had dull brown hair, dark brown eyes, and a quiet, observant personality. My mom never explicitly told me that looking like my father's side of the family was a bad thing. She just conveniently ignored my existence. The blatant favoritism bled into every aspect of our lives. When Veronica turned 15, my mother threw a massive bash. There were 15 invited friends, an expensive 3-tier custom cake from a fancy bakery on Hawthorne Boulevard, and a rented karaoke machine. Just 3 months later, for my 13th birthday, the celebration consisted of the 4 of us sitting at the kitchen table staring at a discounted clearance cake my mom had grabbed from her grocery store on the way home. The icing literally just said, "Happy Birthday," with a blank space where a name should be. It was an abandoned order from a stranger. I did not fully comprehend my status in the family until I turned 12. That was the year I accidentally discovered Veronica had a robust college savings account that my parents had opened when she was just 5. They had been depositing money for 7 years, amassing thousands of dollars. When I innocently asked my mom why I did not have a matching account, she looked at me like I had grown a second head. "Veronica requires financial backing for her university plans," she stated flatly. You will figure it out. You have always been good at adapting." That was the defining moment I realized my designated role. I was the spare part. I was kept under their roof, but I was never genuinely wanted. Everything finally exploded in the summer of 2009. That April, I secretly submitted an application to the Oregon STEM Summer Academy at Oregon State University. It was an elite, 6-week residential program exclusively for kids showing advanced aptitude in math and science. The acceptance came with a full-ride scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and supplies. The total monetary value was $4,500. I did not breathe a word about it to my family. I had learned the hard way that expressing hope out loud in that house was a dangerous game. On May 15th, the official envelope arrived in the mail. Out of more than 2,000 hopeful applicants across the entire state of Oregon, only 50 students were chosen. I was one of them. For exactly one fleeting afternoon, I felt like a human being who actually mattered. But the very next day, Veronica came home raving about an elite performing arts camp down in California that her high school drama teacher recommended. It was a 3-week program, offered zero financial aid, and carried a $900 price tag. That evening at the dinner table, my mother proudly announced the master plan she had formulated. "Julianna, you are going to call and decline that science thing," she ordered, as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "We simply cannot afford the travel and expenses to send both of you away this summer, and Veronica's acting camp is going to look spectacular on her college transcripts." She was actively crushing my future to fund my sister's hobby. I stared down at my dinner plate, my heart pounding against my ribs. The words slipped out of my mouth before my brain could stop it. "No." The entire kitchen went dead silent. Even the hum of the old refrigerator seemed to cut out. "Excuse me." My mother's voice dropped into that terrifying, low register she reserved for difficult customers at the grocery store. "That scholarship is not your money to redistribute," I countered, my voice trembling but defiant. "I worked for this. I earned it. It is mine." My mom glared at me as if a rabid animal had just taken a seat at her table. "If you are entirely incapable of sacrificing for the good of this family," she enunciated slowly, "then you are no longer a part of this family." I was 13. I assumed it was just a dramatic, angry threat. I had no earthly idea she meant it as a literal eviction notice. 3 days after that horrific dinner, I walked home from the public library only to find all my earthly possessions shoved into 2 black hefty trash bags, sitting alone on the front porch. My mother was standing in the doorway, her arms folded across her chest. The rage was gone from her face. Instead, she just looked deeply relieved, like she had finally finished taking out the garbage. "I phoned Walter," she stated coldly. "He is driving down to collect you. From this second forward, you are his problem." I stood frozen on the concrete steps, my brain struggling to process the nightmare. Glancing past her shoulder, I could see my dad lingering in the hallway shadows. He refused to make eye contact. He did not say a single word in my defense. I slowly looked up at the second-story window. Veronica was peering out from behind her sheer curtains. The moment I caught her eye, she quickly retreated into the darkness of her bedroom. She never came downstairs. I sat on those black garbage bags on the porch from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. for agonizing hours. My mother locked the front door after 5 minutes. They did not even bother to turn on the porch light for me. Uncle Walter resided up in Seattle, a grueling 3-hour drive away. He had immediately jumped in his car and drove through the pitch-black night to rescue me. When his silver Honda finally pulled into our driveway, I was still huddled on my bags, my knees pulled tightly to my chest. He parked, stepped out of the car, walked straight up the steps in total silence, and wrapped me in a bear hug so fiercely protective it knocked the wind out of me. "From now on," he whispered into my hair, "you have a home." As we drove north on the I-5 freeway that night, engulfed in darkness, I was just a terrified kid staring blankly out the passenger window. I had absolutely no idea that before Uncle Walter loaded me into his car, my mother had signed a highly specific legal document inside the house. It would take a full 16 years for that piece of paper to see the light of day again. And when it finally did, it would detonate their entire world. Uncle Walter's residence in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle was not a sprawling mansion, but to me, it felt like a palace compared to the suffocating box I had just been exiled from. For the very first time in my existence, I had a bedroom that was exclusively mine. But far more importantly, I had an adult who actively believed in my potential. Uncle Walter was a self-made titan. He had constructed Crane Commercial Holdings entirely from scratch, starting with a single rundown office building he bought after working grueling double shifts for 7 straight years. By the time I moved in with him in 2009, he owned 9 lucrative commercial properties scattered across the Seattle metro area. He had never taken a wife, and he never had children of his own. So when I showed up on his doorstep clutching trash bags, He did not just provide shelter, he poured his soul into mentoring me. Over the next 4 years, I channeled all my lingering pain and rejection into pure academic obsession. I graduated from Ballard High School in 2013 as the class valedictorian and president of the Mathematics Club, boasting a flawless 4.0 unweighted GPA. The University of Washington extended an admissions offer, complete with a partial scholarship to their prestigious Foster School of Business. By 2017, I walked away with my bachelor's degree in finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.96 GPA. All the while, Uncle Walter had been feeding me invaluable real-world experience. He gave me paid internships at Crane Commercial Holdings. Starting my sophomore year of college, I learned his empire from the absolute bottom up, grinding through data entry, analyzing commercial leases, managing tenant relations, and running property valuations. After college, I spent an intense 18 months cutting my teeth at a massive Big Four accounting firm I will just call Preston and Associates, eventually earning my official CPA license in 2019. Exactly 1 year later, Uncle Walter brought me back home, officially offering me the title of corporate controller. By 2022, I was promoted to chief financial officer. On the morning of my 26th birthday, I was successfully managing a massive portfolio of 13 commercial properties valued at a staggering $25.3 million. That morning, Uncle Walter sent me a private email that I still have starred in my inbox. The subject line simply read, "To my daughter." The body of the message was brief but profound. You do not need to prove a single thing to the people who abandoned you, but you do need to prove to yourself that you are worthy of this life. You have. Happy birthday, Julianna. During those entire 16 years in Seattle, my biological relatives reached out a grand total of 3 times. The first instance was in 2011. My mother actively bypassed my phone and called Uncle Walter directly, begging him for a $6,000 handout. My dad had apparently been laid off from the auto shop, and times were tough. She aggressively implied that Walter was morally obligated to bail his brother out. Uncle Walter firmly declined. He recounted the conversation to me later, his jaw clenched in disgust. "They did not ask about you once, Julianna," he muttered. "They did not ask about your grades, or if you were healthy. They only cared about the cash." The second contact was in 2015. Veronica mailed a thick, expensive wedding invitation to the house. There was no handwritten note inside. "No, I miss you," or "Hope you are doing well." Just a sterile, mass-printed card bearing my legal name and the Seattle address. I did not RSVP. I did not mail a blender. I threw it in the recycling bin. The third and final contact occurred in 2019. My mother sent a direct email to my work address, the very first time she had initiated contact with me since the porch incident. The subject line was casually titled, "Checking in." The body of the email noted that she had recently seen my face featured in an article in the Seattle Business Journal regarding our company expanding into the wealthy East Side market. She cheerfully expressed hope that I was thriving and suggested we catch up over coffee sometime soon. I deleted it immediately. I was not holding onto a bitter grudge. I had just successfully constructed a beautiful life that simply had no room for them. Then, in the summer of 2024, our world collapsed. Uncle Walter was diagnosed with advanced stage congestive heart failure. The specialists gave him roughly 12 to 18 months to live. We only got 10. During those agonizing final months, Uncle Walter took several private meetings with his estate attorney. I knew he was updating his will in August of 2024, exactly 6 months before the end. Whenever I gently asked him about the legalities, he would just offer a calm, knowing smile. "Everything is perfectly insulated," he assured me. "You just keep steering the business. I have handled the vultures." I had no clue what specific language he had drafted. I was totally unaware of the clauses. I trusted the man implicitly, completely ignorant of the brilliant legal landmines he had just buried. Uncle Walter took his final breath on February 28, 2025. He passed away peacefully in his sleep at Swedish Medical Center, with my hand holding his. Exactly 1 week later, on March 7th, I was sitting at my executive desk at Crane Commercial Holdings when my cell phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed an unknown Portland area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. Julianna. The voice was instantly recognizable. 16 years had not erased my mother's deeply specific, condescending tone. She said my name as if she were chewing on a piece of gristle she wanted to spit out. Patricia, I replied. My voice was perfectly flat. I did not call her mom, just her legal name. There was a jarring pause on the line. I could literally hear the gears grinding in her head as she absorbed the disrespect. I heard the tragic news about Walter, she pivoted, feigning sorrow. I am just so incredibly sorry for your loss. I was actually hoping to drive up to Seattle for the memorial service to pay my respects to the family. The memorial service was 3 days ago. Another heavy silence. Oh, well, I was also informed that there is a formal will reading scheduled for next week. Immediate family has a legal right to attend these proceedings, you know, especially when it involves a brother's massive estate. And there it was. The mask slipped. The money grab. Who exactly informed you about a will reading? I demanded. I have retained private counsel. A Mr. Victor Harrington. He has been making inquiries on our behalf. That name triggered a dormant memory. Uncle Walter had briefly mentioned a Victor Harrington years ago, a Seattle lawyer he had briefly consulted with and immediately fired. I immediately hung up and dialed Margaret Holloway, Uncle Walter's bulldog of an estate attorney. By the next morning, Margaret had completely validated my worst fears. Patricia and Leonard had hired Victor Harrington to officially file a legal challenge against the estate. Their core argument? Undue influence. They were legally alleging that I had maliciously isolated a dying, vulnerable man from his loving family and brainwashed him into altering his estate in my favor. Furthermore, they were legally demanding front row seats to the will reading as his closest surviving kin. I sat at my desk and stared at a framed photograph of Uncle Walter. In the picture, he had this sly, brilliant smirk on his face. It was almost as if he had seen this exact scenario coming from a mile away. Margaret Holloway's opulent law office was situated on the 47th floor of the Columbia Center, the towering monolith that dominates the Seattle skyline. On a beautiful day, the floor-to-ceiling glass offered breathtaking views of Mount Rainier. But March 10th was gloomy. Heavy rain lashed against the windows as Margaret laid out the battlefield. Victor Harrington has officially filed a contest against the will representing Leonard and Patricia Crane, she stated bluntly, sliding a thick legal binder across her polished mahogany desk. The foundation of their claim is undue influence. They are painting a picture where you aggressively quarantined Walter during his final illness and coerced him into signing over his empire. I scanned the horrific legal jargon, my stomach twisting into knots. They are coming after exactly 50% of the total assets, Margaret continued. Their foundational argument is that, as Walter's sole surviving brother, Leonard is naturally entitled to inherit under intestacy laws, or at the very least, deserves a massive payout that honors the natural bonds of brotherhood. Natural bonds? I scoffed. Leonard and Walter had not spoken a single word to each other for 9 years before I even moved to Seattle. Are you aware of that? I am fully aware. Walter documented the entire timeline for me, Margaret nodded sharply. But their actual legal argument is not what has me concerned. She extracted a secondary sheet of paper. Julianna, they are not trying to win this case in a courtroom. If this devolves into brutal litigation, Walter's estate will be completely frozen in probate for 12 to 18 months. Your properties will lack management funding. Mortgages will default. It will cost hundreds of thousands in attorney fees and permanently cripple the company's valuation. So, this is legal extortion, I realized. They are banking on me throwing a couple million at them just to make them go away. Exactly. It is a very common, very dirty tactic in estate law. I looked down at the fabricated claims. In the section detailing our family history, Patricia actually had the audacity to write in a sworn affidavit that I had callously abandoned my family as a teenager to exploit a wealthy, lonely old man. The woman who literally threw me out onto the street with trash bags was claiming abandonment. Julianna, do you possess any hard documentation regarding the events of 2009? Margaret asked, leaning forward. Anything that legally establishes the exact circumstances of your relocation to Seattle? My mind flashed back to the dark porch, the garbage bags, the 4-hour wait. Margaret, I was 13 years old, I sighed. I was not exactly archiving legal files in my backpack. You were not. But Walter was. Margaret picked up her desk phone and instructed her assistant to retrieve a highly specific box from the firm's deep archives. 20 agonizing minutes later, the assistant returned clutching a faded, yellowed folder. Margaret unsealed it delicately, her eyes darting across the aged paper. When she finally looked up at me, her expression was unreadable. Julianna, were you ever made aware of this? She slid the fragile document across the desk. I stared at the bold, terrifying header at the top of the page. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights and transfer of guardianship. Dated July 15, 2009. The legal text bluntly stated that Leonard James Crane and Patricia Ellen Crane, acting of sound mind, officially and voluntarily surrendered every single parental right, duty, and responsibility regarding their minor child, Julianna Marie Crane, transferring full legal and physical custody to Walter Raymond Crane. At the bottom of the page sat 4 undeniable signatures in black ink. My mother's signature, my father's signature, Uncle Walter's signature, and the official stamp of a King County Notary Public. File number 2009 GH 6291. They did not just kick you out of the house, Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They legally erased you. They signed away their absolute right to be called your parents. In the eyes of the judicial system, Patricia and Leonard Crane ceased being your mother and father the exact second the ink dried on this paper. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I had been sitting out there in the freezing dark, totally oblivious to the fact that inside the house, my mother was eagerly signing my literal existence away. How does this impact their lawsuit? I choked out. Margaret's eyes gleamed with legal predatory instinct. It completely annihilates it. It means Leonard possesses absolutely zero standing to demand an inheritance based on a familial relationship. Legally speaking, he is a total stranger to you. He severed his own bloodline connection in writing with sworn witnesses 16 years ago. Margaret laid out 2 distinct paths. Option 1, the clean route. I call Harrington, inform him his case is built on sand, and offer a nuisance settlement. Say, $600,000. They sign an ironclad NDA, drop the lawsuit, and we avoid a massive public circus. And option 2? We proceed with the will reading on Friday exactly as scheduled. They legally demanded to be in that room. So, we let them walk right into the trap. We publicly dropped this guardianship document, alongside the rest of the arsenal Walter meticulously prepared. Because Julianna, Walter anticipated this exact betrayal. He left me extremely specific instructions. He wanted their greed publicly executed. I drove back to my house that evening and paced the hardwood floors until 3 a.m. I sat in the silent living room, the house Uncle Walter had left to me, and stared at the mantelpiece. It was covered in framed photographs of my entire life. There I was at high school graduation. There was my college commencement. There was the day I passed the CPA exam and my first day sitting in the CFO's chair. In every single image, Uncle Walter was standing right beside me, bursting with pride. There was not a single photograph of Leonard or Patricia in that entire house. Not one. I thought about the profound words from his birthday email. You owe yourself the truth. At exactly 7 a.m. the following morning, I called Margaret. We do the reading, I ordered. No buyouts. No quiet settlements. If they are so desperate for a front row seat to this family's history, I am going to give them a blockbuster. The official reading was slated for Friday, March 14, 2025, at 2 p.m. in the Holloway and Associates Executive Boardroom. That gave us 5 days to arm our nuclear warheads. The next few days were a whirlwind of tactical preparation. My closest friend, Isabella Torres, who had joined Crane Commercial Holdings as the HR director 4 years prior, stepped in to help me aggregate the necessary corporate documents. Isabella was the only soul on earth besides Margaret who knew the horrific reality of my childhood. 52 emails, Isabella announced on Wednesday night, staring at her laptop screen in my office. I found 52 separate emails sent from Walter to you over the last decade, explicitly detailing his burning hatred for Leonard. The digital paper trail was absolutely damning. The truth was, back in 2002, Leonard had begged Walter for a massive $90,000 business loan, swearing in writing to repay the debt within 5 years. Fast forward 23 years, and Leonard had not paid back a single red cent. That catastrophic financial betrayal was what truly shattered their brotherhood. My arrival in Seattle in 2009 had absolutely nothing to do with their estrangement. The bridge had been burned to ash 7 years prior. Isabella also aggregated my flawless financial performance reviews. The data proved that during my 4-year tenure as CFO, the Crane Commercial Holdings portfolio had skyrocketed from $18.2 million to $25.3 million, a staggering 39% surge in value. My occupancy rates were sitting at 97%. The undue influence argument was completely laughable. I was literally the financial architect making the company rich. On Thursday evening, the night before the showdown, I sat on the plush couch in Dr. Lauren Hayes' office, the therapist who had been helping me untangle my trauma since my early 20s. "I want you to be very clear on your internal motivations tomorrow," Dr. Hayes said softly. "You are not walking into that room seeking petty revenge. You are walking in to close a toxic chapter. There is a massive psychological difference. But what if I feel a massive wave of satisfaction when I watch their faces fall?" I asked nervously. Dr. Hayes offered a warm smile. "Julianna, that is simply called experiencing justice. Feeling deeply validated when the absolute truth is exposed is not an act of cruelty. The real test of your character is what you choose to do with your life the day after the reading." I drove home through the slick, rain-soaked streets of downtown Seattle, letting her words wash over me. Before I climbed into bed, I stared myself down in the bathroom mirror. "She holds zero power over you anymore," I whispered to my reflection. "You are the author of this story now." Friday had finally arrived, and I was armed to the teeth. Okay, let us take a quick breather. If you have stuck with me this far and the tension is killing you, drop a comment below with your official prediction. How badly do you think Patricia is going to humiliate herself in this conference room? And if you have ever had to completely sever ties with toxic family members to save your own sanity, please hit that subscribe button. The absolute climax of this story is about to begin. The Holloway and Associates' primary conference room was an intimidating space. Perched on the corner of the 47th floor, the massive windows offered sweeping, panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the jagged Olympic Mountains. On March 14, 2025, the sky was a bruised, menacing gray, a perfect mirror for the atmosphere inside the room. I walked through the double-glass doors exactly 15 minutes early, at 1:45 p.m. I was dressed for war in a sharply tailored navy blue blazer and matching trousers. My hair was pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun. Uncle Walter had taught me years ago that the most dangerous person in the boardroom never needs to dress flashy. The sprawling mahogany table could seat 20 individuals comfortably, with an additional row of leather chairs lining the perimeter walls. When I entered, 15 people had already taken their places. Margaret Holloway commanded the head of the table, flanked by 2 junior paralegals. Thomas Graham, the fiercely loyal senior auditor from Preston and Associates who had managed Walter's taxes for a decade, sat stoically near the glass. There were also 3 sharply dressed strangers representing massive charitable organizations, a delegate from Seattle Children's Hospital, a representative from Habitat for Humanity Northwest, and a director from the Olympic National Park Foundation. Uncle Walter had been quietly funding their operations for 25 years. Finally, 6 of my most trusted senior executives from Crane Commercial Holdings were clustered near the doorway. These were people who had watched me grind from a lowly data entry intern all the way to the CFO chair. Margaret caught my eye and subtly gestured toward the prominent seat positioned dead center of the table, directly in her line of sight. I sat down and methodically squared my thick folder of evidence in front of me. Through the glass partitions of the conference room, I had a clear view of the elevator banks. At precisely 2:03 p.m., the silver doors slid open. My mother marched out first. Even from 50 feet away, I could tell she had aggressively dressed for a performance. She was wearing a brand new, somber black dress, draped in an obnoxious pearl necklace, with her makeup caked on heavily to simulate refined grief. Trailing behind her like a beaten dog was my father, Leonard. He was stuffed into a cheap gray suit that he had clearly outgrown over the last 16 years. Veronica followed closely behind. For some bizarre reason, she had chosen to wear a bright pastel pink sundress to a formal reading, looking as though she was heading to a bottomless mimosa brunch rather than a legal proceeding. Bringing up the rear was their hired gun, Attorney Victor Harrington. Tall, sporting perfectly coiffed silver hair, and radiating the arrogant swagger of a man who squeezed settlements out of grieving widows for a living. He gripped a ridiculously expensive Mont Blanc leather briefcase. The circus had officially arrived in town. Patricia strutted into the conference room operating under the delusion that she was the guest of honor. That was her classic maneuver, aggressively claiming authority she had absolutely no right to. She scanned the crowded room, practicing a look of profound, aristocratic mourning until her eyes snapped onto me. "Ah," she announced, projecting her voice so the entire room was forced to listen. "I see you managed to arrive early." I did not stand up. I did not even uncross my legs. "Patricia," I replied. Just her name. Not Mom. That single word hit her like a physical blow. She froze mid-stride, a flash of genuine fury breaking her grieving widow routine. But she quickly plastered the fake sadness back on. I was really hoping the family could huddle up and speak privately before all the legalities begin, she sighed dramatically. Intimate family matters really belong behind closed doors. The legal proceedings commence in exactly 2 minutes, I stated coldly. Whatever speech you have prepared can wait for the public record. Before Patricia could snap back, Margaret Holloway stood up, dominating the room. "Mrs. Crane, Mr. Crane, Miss Crane, and Mr. Harrington. Welcome. There are assigned seats available for non-beneficiary attending parties located along the back wall. The primary table is strictly reserved for named beneficiaries and official estate representatives." I watched my mother's jaw muscles violently clench. She had fully expected to be seated at the head of the table like royalty. Instead, she was being publicly banished to the peanut gallery. But Patricia refused to go quietly. Instead of walking straight to her chair, she purposely detoured past the charity representatives. She stopped directly in front of the delegate from Seattle Children's Hospital, an elegant woman in her 50s named Dr. Patricia Wells. "Hello, I am Patricia Crane," my mother practically shouted, ensuring her voice carried across the mahogany. "I am Walter's beloved sister-in-law. We shared a beautiful, intimate relationship for decades before this unfortunate period of recent estrangement." She shot a venomous glare in my direction. Dr. Wells offered a tight, deeply uncomfortable nod but refused to validate her with words. Undeterred, Patricia kept performing. "It is just so utterly tragic how certain manipulative people can infiltrate a loving family and completely brainwash a dying man. Walter was just far too trusting for his own good." I kept my eyes glued to the leather binder in front of me. I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Veronica, loudly dragging her chair across the carpet against the back wall, decided to join the chorus. "Yeah, Uncle Walter used to drive down to Portland to visit us all the time when I was little. It is totally ridiculous that she gets a fancy seat up there and his actual blood relatives are shoved in the back." I glanced over at Victor Harrington. The silver-haired lawyer already had his expensive pen out, furiously scribbling notes on his legal pad, desperately hunting for any emotional reaction from me that he could twist into evidence of guilt. I gave him a blank wall. Patricia finally sat down next to Veronica, but her mouth was still running. As Margaret organized her heavy stacks of paper, my mother's voice sliced through the heavy silence one last time. "You know, when a child is fully rejected by her own parents, there is usually a very sinister reason behind it. I just pray to God that Walter finally saw through her wicked facade at the end. A mother always knows." The horrific insult hung in the chilled air. Several of my executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Thomas Graham, the senior auditor, openly glared at Patricia with undisguised disgust. I slowly turned my head and looked at her. I really looked at her, studying her face for the first time in a decade and a half. She had not evolved a single inch. She was still fueled by that exact same desperate need to control the narrative, heavily layered over a massive victim complex. Margaret Holloway loudly cleared her throat. It is exactly 2:10 p.m. We will now begin. With the practiced, surgical precision of a veteran attorney, Margaret sliced open the thick manila envelope containing the estate documents. "This is the last will and testament of Walter Raymond Crane," she boomed, her voice echoing off the glass. Born July 4, 1953. Deceased February 28, 2025. This document was officially executed on August 18, 2024, and represents the absolute final expression of Mr. Crane's wishes regarding the distribution of his entire life's work. Patricia eagerly leaned forward, her pearls clicking against the back of the chair in front of her. Margaret systematically plowed through the mandatory preliminary clauses. Article 1 confirmed his identity. Article 2 officially declared Walter to be of sound mind and body. "Let the record reflect," Margaret emphasized, staring directly at Victor Harrington, "that a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation was conducted by Dr. Stephen Park on August 10, 2024, exactly 8 days prior to the execution of this document. Dr. Park's medical evaluation certifies that Mr. Crane possessed 100% testamentary capacity and was operating under zero undue influence from any outside party." I saw Patricia quickly exchange a terrified glance with her lawyer. Their entire lawsuit hinged on proving Walter was mentally compromised. Margaret had just taken a sledgehammer to their foundation in the first 3 minutes. Margaret swiftly bypassed Article 3, which voided all previous wills, and arrived at Article 4, the inventory of assets. At the exact time of death, Mr. Crane's estate comprised the following: 13 commercial real estate properties spanning King and Snohomish counties, carrying a combined assessed market value of $19.7 million. Diversified investment portfolios containing equity holdings valued at approximately $4.6 million. And liquid cash accounts totaling $1.8 million. From the back wall, I distinctly heard Veronica urgently whisper to Patricia, "Mom, that is over $26 million. Patricia nodded frantically, dollar signs practically flashing in her eyes. Margaret flipped a heavy page. The full will is 51 pages in length. I will now bypass the minor technicalities and proceed directly to Article 5, which explicitly addresses specific exclusions from this estate. She slowly lowered her reading glasses. Article 5, regarding Leonard James Crane, biological brother of the deceased. A massive, greedy smile stretched across Patricia's face. She actually thought they were getting a payout. That smile was about to be permanently wiped off her face. Margaret's voice turned to ice as she read Walter's exact words. "I make absolutely zero provision in this will for my brother, Leonard James Crane, for the following specific reasons, which I demand be read aloud and entered into the public record." Patricia's smile violently twitched. Margaret continued reading the ghost of Walter's fury. First, in March of 2002, Leonard aggressively begged to borrow $90,000 from my personal accounts, signing a legally binding promissory note to repay the total sum within 5 years. 23 years have elapsed. He has not returned a single dollar. I have retained the original, breached promissory note in my files. Leonard's face instantly drained of color. He slumped into his chair, humiliated in front of 20 powerful professionals. Second, Margaret read louder. On July 15, 2009, Leonard and his wife Patricia voluntarily executed a binding legal contract, permanently relinquishing all parental rights to their biological daughter, Julianna Marie Crane, transferring full guardianship to myself. This document was officially witnessed and notarized by the state. Patricia violently kicked her chair back and shot to her feet. "What does that ancient paperwork have to do with anything?" she shrieked. Margaret paused, glared at my mother over her glasses, and continued reading as if a toddler had just thrown a tantrum. "The legal significance of this betrayal is as follows. By intentionally and legally severing their parental relationship with Julianna, Leonard and Patricia permanently annihilated any legal claim they might have possessed to inherit my assets through her. Julianna is my chosen heir. Leonard is no longer legally recognized as her father. Therefore, Leonard possesses zero familial relationship with my designated heir, and thus holds absolutely zero legal standing to contest this will on the grounds of family connection. Now it was Leonard's turn to jump out of his seat. This is a complete farce. I am his blood brother. We share the same DNA. Victor Harrington frantically reached up and yanked his client back down by his cheap suit jacket. But even the slick, high-priced attorney looked like he was going to be physically sick. The legal trap had just snapped shut on his leg. Margaret casually reached into her folder and pulled out a crisp, white document. For the official record, the original voluntary relinquishment of parental rights is permanently on file with the King County Family Court under file number 2009, GH 6291. I hold a certified, state-stamped copy in my hand, which any party present is free to examine. She slammed the paper onto the mahogany table. Patricia stared at the document as if Margaret had just pulled out a live hand grenade. But my mother was incapable of admitting defeat. The carefully constructed mask of the grieving sister-in-law completely shattered. Her voice spiked into a desperate, shrill panic. This is absolute lunacy. That stupid piece of paper is a technicality. We are still her actual family. Margaret's voice remained a deadly monotone. Mrs. Crane, I am formally instructing you to sit down. Disrupting an official legal reading is an offense the probate court takes extremely seriously. Patricia completely ignored the warning. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at my face. She orchestrated this. This little snake manipulated a dying man against his own flesh and blood. She poisoned his mind to steal our money. The room was painfully tense. Dr. Patricia Wells from the Children's Hospital looked deeply disturbed. The charity directors had shown up to collect donations, not witness a Jerry Springer episode. Veronica urgently tugged on the hem of Patricia's black dress. Mom, please sit down. Everyone is staring at us. I do not give a damn who is staring. Patricia howled, her voice cracking under the weight of her vanishing millions. I demand a formal investigation into how this was allowed to happen. Walter loved his brother. It was finally my turn to speak. I did not yell. I did not shake. I let my voice carry that cold, quiet authority Uncle Walter had spent a decade teaching me to wield during brutal real estate negotiations. Make them hold their breath to hear you. Patricia, I said evenly. You made your bed 16 years ago. The massive boardroom fell so quiet you could hear the rain hitting the glass. You packed my entire life into garbage bags. You abandoned a 13-year-old child on a dark porch for 4 hours. And then, you walked into your comfortable living room and signed a legal contract giving me away to a stranger. That was... Patricia sputtered. That was your choice, I cut her off, my tone slicing through the air. Not mine. Not Uncle Walter's. Yours alone. Every single devastating consequence you are facing in this room today is simply the bill arriving for the choice you made that night. Patricia's mouth hung open, gasping for air like a fish thrown on a dock, but her vocal cords completely failed her. I stared dead into her panicked eyes. I do not harbor hatred for you, but I also do not owe you a single breath of consideration. You permanently guaranteed that fact the second you put your signature on that dotted line. In the background, Victor Harrington was scribbling so hard on his legal pad I thought the pen was going to snap, though I have no idea what miraculous defense he thought he was cooking up. Margaret cleared her throat, breaking the heavy tension. If the gallery has concluded their outbursts, we will proceed. I have not yet read Clause 7. Patricia slowly sank back into her leather chair, looking physically deflated. But Clause 7 was the bullet that was going to permanently end her misery. Margaret flipped to page 12, paused for dramatic effect, and dropped the ultimate bomb. Article 7. Designation of sole beneficiary. The entire room leaned in. I hereby bequeath the absolute entirety of my estate, including all commercial real estate properties, diversified investment accounts, liquid cash assets, and personal effects, to my legally adopted daughter, Julianna Marie Crane. The word echoed off the glass walls like a gunshot. Adopted. Patricia's face went pasty white. Not pale. Actually translucent, like the blood had been siphoned from her veins. Adopted. Leonard croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Since when? Margaret answered with lethal precision. Mr. Walter Crane formally and legally finalized the adoption of Julianna Marie Crane on September 12, 2012, when she was 16 years of age. The adoption decree is permanently sealed in King County Family Court under file number 2012, AD 4291. Because you and your wife had already voluntarily terminated your parental rights in 2009, the court required absolutely zero consent from either of you to approve the adoption. Veronica leaned forward, her jaw slack. So, you are not even legally related to us anymore? I looked my sister right in the eye. No, not since the day your parents signed me away as defective property. Margaret continued reading Walter's testament. Julianna is not merely a name on a legal document. She is my daughter in every single definition of the word that matters legally, practically, and emotionally. She has grinded alongside me for years, proving her brilliant competence and unshakable integrity. I trust her implicitly to expand the empire I built. There is no human being on this earth more deserving of my legacy, and no one I have ever loved more. My vision instantly blurred. A hot tear slipped down my cheek. Uncle Walter had aggressively kept the specifics of this clause hidden from me. He knew this dark day would inevitably come, and he had spent years quietly building an impenetrable fortress around me. Patricia was shaking her head in a manic, rhythmic motion, like a mental patient trying to wake up from a hallucination. This cannot hold up in court, she mumbled wildly. Victor, tell them this is illegal. Tell them. Victor Harrington did not say a word. He just stared blankly at his useless legal pad. He knew he had just walked his clients into a legal slaughterhouse. Margaret reached into her master file and extracted a small, sealed, personal envelope. There is one final item to address, she noted softly. Mr. Crane drafted a private letter for Julianna, explicitly instructing me to read a specific portion of it aloud during this proceeding, assuming Julianna grants her consent. I nodded, silently fighting the lump in my throat. Margaret broke the wax seal, unfolding a single piece of lined paper. My heart ached as I recognized Uncle Walter's messy, rushed handwriting, the exact same scrawl I was used to seeing on post-it notes attached to financial reports. Margaret began to read. Julianna. If Margaret is reading this letter out loud to a crowded room, it means my predictions were dead accurate. Your biological relatives showed up like vultures, hunting for millions they never worked for, from a man they never actually loved. I am deeply sorry you have to endure their circus, but I also know your spine is made of steel. A pathetic, whimpering sound escaped Patricia's throat. You arrived on my porch as a bleeding, traumatized kid, discarded by the very people obligated to protect you. But you refused to let their failure become your identity. You weaponized your pain into unstoppable determination. You transformed your unbearable loneliness into fierce independence. I have never been more intensely proud of another human being in my entire life. Margaret's professional tone softened with genuine emotion. I did not save you, Julianna. You saved yourself. I simply provided the roof for you to do it under. Your elite education, your brilliant career, your flawless character, you built every inch of it with your own bare hands. I am gifting you my empire not because you desperately need the money, but because you absolutely deserve the reward. Do not let them manipulate you into feeling an ounce of guilt for surviving them. You owe them absolutely nothing. You owe yourself the world. Forever your father, Walter. I was openly sobbing now, the tears falling freely onto the mahogany table. I did not care who saw. In a final, pathetic act of desperation, Patricia stood up one last time. The fiery rage was completely extinguished, instantly replaced by a sickeningly sweet, toxic imitation of maternal love. Julianna, sweetheart, she cooed, her voice trembling with fake emotion. I know things were incredibly difficult when you were a teenager. I admit I made severe parenting mistakes. I was under so much stress. But at the end of the day, we share the same blood. We can heal from this. Cannot we please just sit down like a real family and discuss dividing the estate in a fair, equitable manner? I wiped the wet tears from my face and stared at the woman who had birthed me. You forfeited the right to call me your sweetheart 16 years ago on that porch. Patricia snapped. I am formally contesting this will. She screamed at the room. Victor, stand up and tell them we possess legal grounds. We are suing for undue influence. Walter was a sick, manipulated old man. Victor Harrington finally opened his mouth, but he sounded like a man standing on the gallows reading his own death warrant. Mrs. Crane, I strongly advise that we retreat and discuss our remaining options in private. No, tell these people we are taking them to trial. Margaret Holloway calmly reached out and spun her iPad around so the bright screen faced the back wall. Mr. Harrington, Margaret said, her voice dripping with venom. Perhaps you would like the floor to explain this particular piece of correspondence to your irate clients. The boardroom went dead quiet again. Let the record reflect, Margaret read aloud from the screen, that I am presenting an email dated March 3, 2022, sent directly from Walter Crane to Victor Harrington. The subject line reads, Termination of Legal Services. In the body of the email, Mr. Crane writes, Victor, I am effectively terminating our professional attorney-client relationship. Your persistent, unsolicited advice that I should include my brother Leonard in my estate planning, despite my thorough documentation of his financial theft and his horrific abuse of my daughter Julianna, is totally unacceptable. I will be securing new legal counsel immediately. Margaret slowly looked up, locking eyes with the disgraced lawyer. You previously served as legal counsel for Walter Crane. You were explicitly fired because you aggressively advocated for Leonard's financial interests against your own client's wishes. And yet, you gleefully accepted this lawsuit against Walter's estate without ever disclosing that massive conflict of interest to your current clients. Victor's face flushed a deep, humiliating shade of purple. Patricia slowly turned her head, staring at the expensive lawyer she had hired to save her. You promised me we had an airtight case. He could not even look her in the eye. Without uttering a single word in his defense, Victor Harrington abruptly stood up. His hands were violently shaking as he scrambled to snap his expensive Mont-Blanc briefcase shut. All of his polished, country club swagger had completely evaporated. I require time to review these new documents, he stammered, his voice cracking. We must reconvene privately, Mrs. Crane. Reconvene what? Patricia shrieked, totally unhinged. You are running away in the middle of a legal hearing? Victor did not answer. He turned his back on his clients and practically sprinted toward the glass double doors, walking with the terrified, stiff gait of a man who realized his entire lucrative legal career was about to go up in flames. Victor! Patricia screamed down the hallway. Victor, get back here. The heavy glass door clicked shut, sealing her fate. Patricia was left standing totally alone, publicly abandoned by her own legal shield in a room full of millionaires she had desperately wanted to impress. Leonard had not moved a muscle in 20 minutes. He was just slumped over, staring blankly at his cheap dress shoes. He had spent his entire pathetic life letting Patricia make the decisions, and she had just confidently marched them both straight off a financial cliff. Veronica was quietly crying into her hands against the back wall. Honestly, I could not even tell if she was sobbing over the lost millions or the sheer, unadulterated public humiliation. Patricia slowly turned to face me. The aristocratic mask was permanently destroyed. All that remained was raw, naked desperation, and beneath that, perhaps the very first genuine flicker of actual regret she had felt in 16 years. Julianna. Her voice completely broke. We can still fix this. I mean, we are still a family unit, right? Blood has to mean something. You could still. I pushed my chair back and stood up to my full height. Patricia, you legally ceased being my family on July 15, 2009. You signed the paperwork with your own hand. I did not rip this family apart. You did. I gathered my massive folder of evidence and stared her down. I honestly just feel a profound sense of pity for you. But you hold absolutely zero claim over my life. Not legally. Not financially. Not emotionally. I turned my back on her and looked at Margaret. Can we please finish the remaining articles? Margaret offered a sharp nod. Patricia collapsed heavily into her chair and did not utter another syllable for the remainder of the hour. Margaret smoothly transitioned back into her legal cadence. Article 9. Charitable Bequests. The three charity directors immediately sat up straighter. I explicitly direct that the following immediate cash gifts be distributed from my liquid assets: $600,000 to Seattle Children's Hospital, specifically earmarked to establish a permanent academic scholarship fund for pediatric patients from abusive or disadvantaged backgrounds. $400,000 to Habitat for Humanity Northwest, restricted solely for the construction of low-income housing inside the greater Seattle limits. And $300,000 to the Olympic National Park Foundation to fund youth environmental education. Dr. Patricia Wells pressed her hand to her chest, her eyes watering. Walter has been our anonymous guardian angel for 2 decades. This specific endowment is going to alter the trajectory of hundreds of young lives. The Habitat for Humanity director chimed in softly. We have already built 8 family homes using Walter's private funding over the years. This check guarantees at least 5 more. Margaret looked up from the document. Furthermore, Mr. Crane requests that his daughter, Julianna, assumes total control over his philanthropic board seats, granting her absolute discretion over future corporate donations. He notes that he trusts her judgment without reservation. I accept, I said clearly. I will protect and honor every single pillar of the empire Uncle Walter built. As I looked at the 3 charity representatives, a brilliant realization washed over me. They were not sitting in this room because the probate court mandated their attendance. They were invited because Uncle Walter specifically wanted them here as highly respected, completely neutral witnesses. If Patricia and Leonard ever attempted to drag this circus in front of a real judge, Walter had ensured the courtroom would be packed with unimpeachable witnesses who could testify to exactly how unhinged my parents were. He had orchestrated the perfect checkmate from beyond the grave. Dr. Wells caught my gaze and offered a deeply warm, maternal smile. Walter spoke of you at every single charity gala, Julianna. It was always, Julianna closed this massive deal, or Julianna structured this new tax initiative. He worshipped the ground you walked on. I had to blink rapidly to stop a fresh wave of tears. Even after his death, Uncle Walter had meticulously packed the room with professionals who believed in my worth. Once Margaret finalized the tedious closing clauses of the will, she closed the binder and looked at me. Julianna, as the sole beneficiary and the legally appointed executor of this estate, do you wish to enter a final statement into the record? I had not prepared a grand speech, but as I felt the weight of 47 pairs of eyes fixed on me, I realized I needed to speak, not to twist the knife in Patricia's chest, but to finally validate my own reality. I stood up at the head of the table. The majority of you in this room knew Uncle Walter far longer than I did. He opened his door to a terrified 13-year-old girl who had absolutely nothing to offer him but baggage. He provided me with a safe harbor, an elite education, and above all else, he gave me a family that actively chose to love me. I swept my gaze across my loyal executives who had mentored me and the charity directors who had witnessed Walter's endless empathy. With this incredible inheritance, I vowed to aggressively expand the footprint of Crane Commercial Holdings with the exact same ruthless integrity he taught me. The massive charitable commitments will not only be maintained, they will be increased. Effective immediately, I am personally establishing the Crane STEM Foundation, a full-ride scholarship specifically designed for brilliant children trapped in toxic family dynamics who desperately need an adult to believe in their potential. I slowly turned my eyes toward Patricia, who was sitting perfectly rigid against the wall, staring at the floor. Regarding the biological relatives sitting in this room, I harbor no lingering thirst for revenge. I have made complete peace with the atrocities of the past. But making peace does not equal pretending the abuse never occurred. And it certainly does not mean I am obligated to unlock doors that I spent 16 agonizing years boarding up. I took a deep, cleansing breath. Uncle Walter taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Family is an active choice. The people who stand beside you in the trenches when your entire world collapses, those are your true family. By that exact metric, the loyal employees and trusted friends sitting at this mahogany table are infinitely more related to me than the people who happen to share my DNA. I sat down. For 10 agonizing seconds, the boardroom was entirely silent. And then Thomas Graham, the gruff senior auditor, slowly raised his hands and began to clap. Within seconds, the executives joined in. Then the charity directors. The sound of applause filled the room. Patricia did not move a muscle. At exactly 3:47 p.m., Margaret Holloway struck her pen against the table. The last will and testament has been read and executed in its absolute entirety. All legal requirements are fully satisfied. Ms. Crane, please coordinate with my paralegal team on Monday morning to initiate the massive asset transfer. This hearing is officially adjourned. The heavy tension finally snapped. People began standing up, shaking hands, and murmuring in hushed, excited tones. Patricia pushed herself up from her leather chair, moving with the agonizing stiffness of a woman who had aged 2 decades in 2 hours. Leonard was already sprinting for the exit doors, refusing to make eye contact with a single soul. Veronica quickly grabbed her designer purse and practically jogged after her defeated father without muttering a word. But Patricia lingered for a moment. She stopped near the door and slowly turned back to look at me one final time. Her expensive makeup was heavily smeared beneath her eyes. The arrogant, untouchable matriarch who had strutted into the Columbia Center fully expecting to walk out a multimillionaire now looked incredibly small and utterly broken. She parted her lips, as if her brain was desperately trying to formulate the words "I'm sorry." But the words died in her throat. She slowly closed her mouth, turned her back on me, and walked out the glass doors, disappearing into the elevator lobby. I sat there and watched her leave. The woman who had treated me like defective merchandise, who had cheerfully signed legal documents to permanently erase me from her life, and who had the absolute audacity to show up 16 years later demanding a massive paycheck for her cruelty. I waited for the massive surge of victorious adrenaline. But it never came. Instead, I just felt a strange, profound emptiness, the quiet, exhausted peace that settles over you when a 16-year war finally comes to an end. As the boardroom slowly emptied, Dr. Wells from the Children's Hospital walked over and warmly grasped both of my hands. "Walter bragged about you at every single board meeting, Julianna. He confided in me once that rescuing you from that porch was the single greatest investment he ever made. Sitting here today, it is glaringly obvious why." She pressed a premium business card into my palm. "When you are ready to formally structure that new STEM scholarship, please dial my private cell." Isabella suddenly appeared behind me, wrapping me in a massive hug. "You survived the ambush," she whispered fiercely. "Walter is looking down right now, grinning ear to ear." I picked up the framed photograph of Uncle Walter I had placed on the table. I truly hoped she was right. Let me pause the story right here for just a second to catch my breath. That confrontation was the exact moment I had spent a decade dreading, yet secretly praying for. If you have ever been forced to stand your ground against a toxic abuser who genuinely believed they were the victim, you know exactly how mentally draining that adrenaline dump is. Have you ever survived a similar family confrontation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you are desperate to hear the brutal legal fallout that hit that shady lawyer, keep watching, because the karma is absolute perfection. Exactly 1 week after the explosive reading, Margaret Holloway officially filed a devastating 55-page complaint with the Washington State Bar Association. The target? Victor Harrington's blatant ethical corruption. I never even asked her to do it. Margaret filed the paperwork because she was a shark who strictly adhered to her professional duty. When a licensed attorney actively witnesses another lawyer violating the sacred rules of professional conduct, they are legally obligated to report the breach. Margaret's vicious complaint highlighted 3 massive, undeniable violations. First, conflict of interest. Harrington had previously served as Walter's counsel, giving him illegal access to deeply confidential information regarding the estate's vulnerabilities. Second, failure to disclose. Harrington intentionally hid his prior relationship with Walter from Patricia and Leonard to secure their retainer fee. Third, malicious misrepresentation. Harrington knowingly manipulated his clients into believing they possessed a slam-dunk legal case, despite knowing their position was utterly destroyed by the 2009 relinquishment documents. Margaret kept me in the loop as the legal guillotine slowly fell. 2 months later, in late May of 2025, the State Bar Association delivered a crushing verdict. Victor Harrington was officially slapped with a 6-month suspension from practicing law in the state of Washington. Furthermore, he was ordered to pay a massive $20,000 fine and forced to complete remedial ethics seminars. But the true punishment happened behind the scenes. Within 3 weeks of the public suspension, 4 of Harrington's wealthiest corporate clients panicked and quietly transferred their massive retainers to rival firms. According to the vicious gossip circulating the Seattle legal community, Victor's firm bled roughly $250,000 in lost revenue that fiscal year alone. Do you feel a sense of poetic justice watching Harrington's career implode? Isabella asked me over coffee one morning. I did not lay a finger on him, I replied honestly. He built his own gallows. I was just lucky enough to be sitting in the front row when the trapdoor finally opened. And that was the absolute truth. I never sought malicious revenge against the man. I did not launch a smear campaign. He chose to accept a deeply compromised lawsuit. He chose to lie to his desperate clients. He gambled his entire reputation on bullying me into a quiet settlement, and he lost everything. Roughly 3 weeks after the reading, a notification popped up in my inbox from an unfamiliar address, patriciacrane1967@gmail.com. The subject line simply read, "Please read." The body of the message was surprisingly long. Patricia was historically terrified of putting a paper trail in writing, heavily preferring manipulative phone calls where she could easily gaslight, interrupt, and rewrite history in real time. "Julianna," the email began. "I know you probably want to delete this immediately, but I am begging you to hear me out. I have spent weeks agonizing over the disaster at the will reading. I was blinded by grief and anger, and I lashed out with words I deeply regret. But I want to acknowledge that I have finally realized I made severe mistakes when you were a teenager. Your father and I were drowning in financial stress. We were totally overwhelmed, and the situation simply spiraled out of our control. I swear to God I am not writing this to beg for a cut of the inheritance. I just desperately want a chance to heal our fractured bond. We are still a family, Julianna. Human blood does not magically evaporate just because a judge stamped a piece of paper. I am still your mother. Nothing on earth can alter that biological fact. Can we please just meet for coffee? I know if we sat down in person, we could fix this mess. I love you. I always have. Mom." I sat back in my desk chair and read the email 3 separate times. Then, I picked up my phone, dialed Dr. Hayes, and read the entire tragic paragraph aloud to her. As a professional, what glaring red flags do you spot in that text? Dr. Hayes asked gently. I analyzed the words critically. She vaguely admits to making mistakes, but entirely refuses to specify the horrific abuse she inflicted. She aggressively shifts the blame onto external circumstances like financial stress to excuse throwing her child away. She claims she does not want the millions, but immediately demands an in-person meeting to fix the mess. And the ultimate insult, she still signs off as mom, aggressively ignoring the legal reality that she terminated that title 16 years ago. So, Dr. Hayes said, "What is your next move?" It took me 2 full days to carefully craft my response. When I finally hit send, my reply was exactly 4 sentences long. "Patricia, I read your message. I forgave your atrocious actions many years ago strictly for my own mental peace, not to absolve your guilt. However, I have absolutely zero desire to cultivate a relationship with you. Do not attempt to contact me ever again." She never sent a reply. And honestly, I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I just felt glorious, unadulterated clarity. Exactly 2 months after the Columbia Center showdown, another piece of correspondence arrived at my Seattle condo. It was not a digital message. It was a physical, handwritten letter tucked into a crinkled envelope bearing a Portland postmark. The return address read, V. Ashford. Veronica had officially dropped the Crane name when she married her ex-husband years ago. I sliced the envelope open with heavy hesitation, fully bracing myself for another round of toxic manipulation. But the words on the page completely caught me off guard. Julianna, I am not mailing this letter to beg for cash. I do not want a dime from the estate, and I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am just writing to confess something I should have screamed out loud 16 years ago. On the night Mom and Dad threw your life in the garbage, I was hiding behind the curtains in my bedroom window. I watched you sitting on those trash bags. I stared at you for 4 agonizing hours. I watched you shivering in the dark, waiting for a savior, and I never walked down the stairs. I easily could have. I was 15 years old. I could have snuck you a blanket or a glass of water, or at least sat on the concrete next to you and told you I was so sorry this was happening. Instead, I just stared out the glass like an absolute coward. That horrific memory has eaten me alive ever since. Every single time Mom would go on a rant, blaming you for abandoning us and playing the tragic victim, my mind would instantly flash back to that window. I know I was completely complicit. I am not asking for a magical reunion. I am not demanding a relationship. I just needed you to know that I am fully aware I am a terrible person for what I did. I failed my little sister when she was at her most vulnerable. You deserved a protector, and I failed you. If you burn this letter and never speak to me again, I totally accept it. But I refuse to let another year pass without finally owning my cowardice. Veronica. I sat on my sofa and read the ink until the words blurred together. It was the very first piece of genuine, unadulterated honesty any member of my biological family had offered me in my entire existence. I did not instantly draft a reply. I needed serious time to process the massive emotional shift occurring in my chest. But for the very first time in a decade and a half, when the image of my older sister crossed my mind, the overwhelming emotion was not a burning resentment. It was something dangerously close to hope. It took me 4 months of intensive therapy sessions with Dr. Hayes to finally write Veronica back. I had to drill down into what I genuinely desired, stripped of any societal pressure to be the bigger person. The conclusion I arrived at genuinely shocked me. I did not want to permanently lock Veronica out of my life. Her raw letter had bypassed the endless excuses and hit the absolute core of the trauma. No begging for a payout. No deflecting blame. Just brutal accountability. But I also was not stupid. 16 years of radio silence and a lifetime of golden child syndrome does not magically vanish overnight because of a single apology letter. I needed an iron fortress of boundaries. I finally mailed my response. Veronica, I have read your confession multiple times. I respect the incredible courage it took to finally admit the truth without hiding behind excuses. I am not currently prepared to dive into a full-fledged sisterhood, but I am cautiously willing to open a line of communication, strictly under the following non-negotiable conditions. Condition 1. You are permanently banned from discussing Mom or Dad. I have legally and emotionally severed ties with them, and that boundary is absolute. Condition 2. We will never, under any circumstances, discuss personal finances, business matters, or Uncle Walter's estate. Condition 3. I retain the absolute right to terminate any conversation or block your number without providing a reason. If I pull away, you will respect the silence. If you can abide by these rules, we can initiate a monthly 15-minute video call. Keep the topics light and surface level. We will see if there is a foundation worth building on, but it will be entirely on my terms. Let me know your decision. Julianna. Her digital reply hit my phone exactly 3 days later. It was a single word: accepted. I gritted my teeth and scheduled our inaugural video call for the following Saturday afternoon. 15 heavily guarded minutes. That was my absolute limit. But it was a crack in the ice. That first monumental video chat took place in September of 2025, exactly half a year after the chaotic will reading. I sat perfectly rigid in my home office chair, watching the digital timer on my laptop count down to 2 p.m. My heart was thumping violently against my ribs, honestly, worse than it had during the legal showdown with Patricia. Annihilating my mother in a boardroom was an act of brutal self-defense. Choosing to be emotionally vulnerable with the sister who abandoned me felt terrifyingly dangerous. The screen flickered and Veronica's face materialized. She looked drastically different than the panic-stricken woman in the pastel sundress from the conference room. She was wearing a baggy sweatshirt, completely stripped of makeup, looking exhausted but incredibly grounded. "Hi," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Hi," I echoed. We just stared at each other through the pixels for an eternity. 16 years of profound heartbreak compressed into a tiny digital box. "I was honestly terrified you would not actually pick up," she confessed, offering a weak smile. I was hovering my finger over the decline button, I admitted bluntly. That brutal honesty broke the suffocating tension. Veronica let out a shaky, terrified laugh of sheer relief, and to my absolute shock, the corners of my own mouth actually curled up into a faint smile. We strictly adhered to the surface-level rules. She excitedly told me she was currently enrolled in beauty school, actively grinding hours to secure her nail technician license. She casually dropped the names of her kids, Marcus, who was 9, and Lily, who was 7, but she did not aggressively push me to play the role of the loving aunt. In return, I gave her brief, vague updates about the endless Seattle rain and the chaotic real estate market. At exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds, I cleared my throat. "We are hitting the time limit. I am going to sign off." "Julianna, wait." Veronica rushed out before my mouse could click the red button. "Just, thank you. Thank you for granting me a sliver of a chance. I know I absolutely did not deserve one." "This is just step one," I replied, keeping my emotional armor fully intact. "We will see how it evolves." "Step one is a miracle," she smiled. We locked in a date for the following month. As the screen faded to black, I sat in my silent office, heavily exhaling the breath I had not realized I was holding. I have absolutely no idea if Veronica and I will ever share a profound, trusting sisterhood. Maybe we will be permanently stuck in this shallow, highly regulated dynamic for the rest of our lives. But for the very first time in our turbulent history, I was the one holding the steering wheel. I was dictating the terms. And reclaiming that raw power was worth infinitely more than the $26 million sitting in my bank account. March 14, 2026. Exactly 1 year to the day since the explosive while reading that permanently altered the trajectory of my life. I was standing alone on a busy sidewalk in the Capitol Hill district, staring up at a modest, 3-story commercial brick building. This was the very first piece of real estate Uncle Walter had ever purchased back in 1987, when he was just a hungry 34-year-old visionary scraping together pennies for a down payment. We had just finished a massive renovation on the property last autumn, installing sleek new windows, upgrading the entire HVAC system, and planting gorgeous fresh landscaping. But I was not there to inspect the brickwork. I was staring at a heavy, polished bronze plaque that had just been permanently mounted next to the glass entrance. The Walter R. Crane Building. In loving memory of a man who firmly believed that love is a choice, not a bloodline obligation. 1953 to 2025. I gently traced the cold, embossed letters of his name with my fingertips. In the 12 months since I legally inherited the empire, Crane Commercial Holdings had aggressively expanded by 13%. The total asset portfolio was now flirting with $28 million. Our tenant occupancy rates were locked comfortably above 96%. I had successfully acquired 3 massive new commercial spaces and fully modernized 4 older ones. But the achievement that made my chest swell with the most pride was the Crane STEM Scholarship Foundation. We had just issued our inaugural round of massive financial grants. 6 brilliant teenagers, all currently trapped in incredibly abusive or poverty-stricken households, were awarded full-ride funding to attend elite summer mathematics and science academies. Dr. Wells from Seattle Children's Hospital had personally sat on my board to help handpick the recipients. Uncle Walter's legacy was actively saving lives. Veronica and I were still rigorously maintaining our monthly video check-ins. The agonizing awkwardness had slowly begun to thaw. We had organically extended the rigid 15-minute timer to 30 minutes. I had finally seen adorable school pictures of my niece and nephew. She had taken a virtual tour of my newly decorated condo. We were definitely not traditional sisters who braided each other's hair and shared deep secrets, but we were undeniably something. And that something was authentic. As for Patricia and Leonard, they had completely surrendered. The phone calls ceased, the manipulative emails stopped, and they faded into the background noise of Portland. I have absolutely zero clue what their miserable existence looks like today, and the most beautiful part is that I genuinely do not care to find out. My HR director and best friend, Isabella, strolled down the sidewalk and stopped beside me, admiring the gleaming bronze plaque. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly, bumping her shoulder against mine. I took a long, deep breath of the crisp Seattle air, internally scanning my soul for any lingering traces of the terrified 13-year-old girl sitting on the garbage bags. She was finally gone. "I am completely at peace," I smiled. And honestly, that is a million times better than just being happy. Uncle Walter saved my life by teaching me that family is a conscious, active choice. And after 16 years of surviving in the dark, I had finally learned how to choose myself. If you analyze my traumatic journey through the lens of psychology, there is a devastating clinical concept known as conditional self-worth. It is the toxic, deeply ingrained belief that your life only holds value if specific people grant you their approval. I spent the first 13 years of my existence completely imprisoned by that lie. I falsely believed that my mother's cold indifference was concrete proof that I was fundamentally broken. What actually rescued me from that darkness was not Uncle Walter's massive bank accounts or his real estate empire. It was his radical, unconditional acceptance. He looked at me and saw exactly who I was, completely unconcerned with who I was supposed to be. If you take a single piece of advice away from my story, let it be this: you absolutely do not need another human being's permission to recognize your own staggering worth. You possess every fundamental right to construct titanium boundaries to protect your peace, even if those boundaries lock out your own parents, even if it severs your own bloodline. Forgiveness is an internal journey you embark on to heal your own heart. Reconciliation is an external privilege that the abuser has to actively earn. Those are two entirely separate concepts, and absolutely nobody on this planet gets to dictate which one you choose to offer. Your life is your story to write. Make sure you are the one holding the pen. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this intense, emotional roller coaster. If my journey resonated with your soul, or if you have ever had to fight tooth and nail to reclaim your self-worth after a toxic family member tried to completely obliterate it, please know that you are absolutely not alone in this fight. If you crave more empowering stories about shattering toxic cycles, establishing ruthless boundaries, and ultimately finding your true path, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, check out the description box below for direct links to similar incredible stories. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and take care of yourselves.